This is an RNZ podcast.
Kia ora and welcome to the Kim Hill Collection. Angie Meiklejohn lived at the infamous Centrepoint commune in the late 1980s. The commune was shut down in the year 2000, of course, and its founder was jailed. And over the years there have been lots of books and articles and a very good podcast series as well about Centrepoint. Many of them are excellent. But the 2018 documentary Angie, which Meiklejohn is talking about in this interview, is probably one of the most personal and, certainly in her case, cathartic of all. This is a deep and raw and honest discussion. Just a note that this interview does discuss sexual abuse and drugs, so please do be judicious about whether or not you listen.
When Angie Meiklejohn went to Centrepoint community as a teenager, she was already in trouble. Sexually abused, unstable mother, absent father, known to the police. Centrepoint compounded the damage. It was closed down in 2000. The leader, Bert Potter, was jailed for drug crimes and sex abuse of minors. He died in 2012. Angie and her 3 siblings went on to lives of struggle. Director Costa Botes has made a documentary about Angie and her efforts to recover herself. It'll screen at the International Film Festival. It's extraordinarily frank. I asked Angie if she was now taken aback by the frank nature of it all.
No, because that's how I am. So what you see is what you get. What you hear is what you is what I've been through.
It's an interesting paradox, though, isn't it? Because you talk about how what's happened to you makes it hard to be yourself when you're around other people. And yet you say it's all out there.
Yeah, that is an interesting paradox. It's not like I'm thinking about that while I'm with other people. What has often been present, and it's something that I continue to work on, has been the level of shame and self-hatred and self-disgust, and actually through making the film, and mainly through watching the edits as it's come together, I feel like in a way that the shame that I've been carrying of what happened to us at Centrepoint, or to me, has lifted, because shame, I guess, is about how I feel about myself in relation to others. So telling that story, that was the thing that I've been carrying, that I've been ashamed about.
So you feel unburdened?
In a way, yeah. I feel like that was an aspect of myself and my history that I hadn't shared in the public domain. And I didn't foresee that. That has really come as a bit of a surprise, just that feeling of, it's like when Bert Potter died, I felt like I'd stepped out of this long, dark, thick, heavy cloak, and until I stepped out of it, I didn't actually know that I was wearing it. It just was so odd to feel a level of freedom that I didn't have before, and it's the same with this.
Let's talk about Centrepoint for a moment. Is it fair to say that Centrepoint was a bit of a magnet for people who were already damaged and thought they could bring their lives together, keep their families together, as your mother thought, at Centrepoint?
Absolutely. It was a therapeutic-based community. That's what they were offering. They were offering a different way of living that was, you engaged in therapy, there was group therapy. I mean, the whole reason why Centrepoint began is because of the group therapy.
Not everybody was damaged, though, were they? I'm thinking there are, maybe I'm getting it wrong, maybe I'm stereotyping, but I mean, there were functioning, professional, intelligent people at Centrepoint.
Absolutely. I was actually flicking through a bit of the film last night, and I stopped on a shot that was taken. My brother's actually in it. I actually looked at the shot closely to see if I was in it, and I wasn't. It must have been hiding. And I looked at all the people, and I felt into how I felt about them. And a lot of them I really liked. Like, there were some amazing people there. Professionals like what you're talking about, doctors, lawyers, accountants, people who ran businesses on the property, upstanding, middle class. It was quite middle class. And I liked a lot of the people. Yeah.
Do you think that Bert Potter and indeed his wife and other people there made a beeline for the more vulnerable then?
I don't know.
Because you were vulnerable, right? I mean, you were troubled by the time you arrived at Centrepoint.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of a predator, you were prey, weren't you?
I didn't have an adult perspective when I was there. Like, I was 15, and as you say, I was already quite wounded, quite traumatised. And I focused on the luxury and the space, and
it was like paradise.
It was like paradise after living in little wee slummy flats and social welfare homes, and it was just this beautiful, like a recreation park. It was heavenly. So I didn't really notice what was happening, and I certainly didn't see sexual abuse, things like that. They were not out in the open. They weren't talked about. What was talked about was that they had an open sexualisation policy. So as long as someone wasn't saying no, you could do whatever you wanted to children as long as you were asking them and they were saying yes. And we didn't really find out that information till later, like sitting in some of the talks that Bert Potter gave on a Saturday morning, and he talked about his philosophy. So what was kind of presented and what was talked about was a little bit different from what we were experiencing on a daily basis.
But it must have been paradise, particularly for you as a teenager. There was great food, and there were free drugs and free sex. I mean, on paper, that sounds fabulous, doesn't it?
Well, when you put it like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found people there. I wasn't into them. I had my own punk rock boyfriends outside the community. I didn't get involved and intimately in the community until I had an ecstasy trip, until they started taking ecstasy and giving us ecstasy. And I had an ecstasy trip with Bert, and then that kind of began my sexualisation into the community. And there was a point, and I explain it in the film, where I made a conscious choice to belong at the community and to stop kicking up, stop rebelling.
Because you needed to belong somewhere.
I did. I didn't want to go back into... Well, and it was at that... When I took ecstasy with Bert and I was coming up on my trip, and I said, whoa, I'm out of here, man. Look at those trees and the sun outside. I just want to be in the bush. And I went to leave, and he said, if you leave, you come up here to take a trip with me. If you leave this room, you'll have to leave the community and your mother and your sisters and your brother. And I was coming off on E, and I was just like, no way. I can't do that. And so I stayed there and endured, sex therapy for however many hours, because I wanted to belong. I wanted to be with my family.
What did adults see in Bert Potter, do you think?
Well, when I was working with Angie Meiklejohn on the Centrepoint book, that's how this whole meeting Costa and everything began.
She was planning to write a book.
Yeah, she was a friend of mine, and we had a conversation about Centrepoint one day, and she was interested, and then we put a proposal into a publisher. They accepted it.
I read an article she wrote which said it just got too dark and too complicated.
Yeah, she wrote the first draft, and she came into some troubles, couple of, feeling like she was at breakdown point. I think the information that she was being given, the detail of what people experienced, And I think a lot of what she came up against was the unhealed trauma that still exists with people. So they'd say, oh yeah, I'm happy to be interviewed. And then she'd touch on something and she'd just watch their faces turn and watch the atmosphere change. And she knew that she was no longer welcome. So she came up against trauma. And I can't remember what your original question was.
Why is it that some people cannot talk about this? That the trauma was so great, and you undoubtedly were traumatised, and yet you've gone in the other direction. You can talk about it.
Well, yeah, that was my original point. So I was going to go and talk with Henry Stonex, who was like my Centrepoint father that I ended up having a sexual relationship with that got really twisted when I was 16.
You mean he purported to be a father figure?
Oh, yeah.
And then wanted sex from you?
Well, yeah, it was kind of a bit more complex than that. But, yeah, we ended up in a sexual relationship. I went to meet him. Anka was meant to come with me, but her friend died in a car accident the day before. So she stayed in Christchurch, and I went and met Henry on my own. And in that meeting with him, I disassociated.
What does that mean, disassociation?
So for me, it means I go out of body. So it's like I almost go back and I can see myself conversing with the person and driving and doing whatever I'm doing, but I know I'm like way back. It's like there's a fog or a screen and I'm not quite fully there.
And is that a kind of protective?
I think it must be.
Device, yeah.
And I think that started happening when I was really young. Like, I was abused from about 1.5 to 2.5, something like that, years old.
By one of your mother's partners?
Yeah.
Of whom there were many, right?
There were many, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in terms of your question about why it's so difficult to talk about, the whole reason why I engaged in that project with Anka, and subsequently have ended up making this film with Costa, or he's ended up making this film about me, was I felt like it has, the whole Centrepoint experience is like this dark stain on New Zealand's landscape, sex abuse, drugs, and we just kind of pushed it over, and yet it's never come up. It's never come up to be discussed. It's never come up to be kind of analysed. No one's ever told the story from the inside out. It's been reported on from the outside.
Well, Sarah Smuts-Kennedy talked about it.
People have talked about it. Yes, they have, yeah.
And so what are you saying? If it's been talked about, how can it not be talked about?
It's something about, I don't really know, but it's something about it hasn't been processed. So it may have been talked about, and we may have a comprehension at the level of mind of what's happened, or what happened, but possibly it hasn't gone any deeper than that. And I don't really know why that is, apart from my own experience of telling the story in the public domain. I feel like this layer of shame has lifted. So what I feel is, and what Anka came across when she was researching the book, is all of these key figures at Centrepoint, like Bert's right-hand men and women, have manuscripts that are ready to be published on their deathbed. So they're not going to be published while they're alive. So people
and they're not likely to be helpful to you, are they? Because they're going to be self-justifying and they're going to be a denial of any abuse if they were Bert Potter's right-hand people.
I don't know. Like, maybe they want to come clean. Maybe they want to... I think people are carrying shame of maybe the fact that they didn't say no, that they didn't really agree with marching their 11, 12-year-old girls up the hill to be deflowered by Bert Potter. Maybe they actually felt that was wrong, but they were doing it. So it's like there's this kind of split that happens inside, or maybe a denial of one's own truth in that moment because you've given this person the power and he's saying that's what he wants. So you go along with it. I always felt when I was there that there was some kind of, like, as teenagers, we were told not to talk about anything that happened in the community, outside the community. It's like there was a way of being in the community and outside people wouldn't understand, and you did not talk about what happened. And I think that's why people haven't talked about what's happened. It's because there was such a pact, or a pact's like a tiny word for quite a big concept, but
It's like that's how a cult works, right?
yeah, exactly. That's how it becomes a cult, from like just being a spiritual community.
I'm talking to Angie Meiklejohn about a documentary that Costa Botes has just made about her. You were with your siblings there.
Yeah.
How long did it take before you could all sit down together and discuss what had happened?
Well, sometimes little pieces of information would come out over like family dinners. My sister lives in Whangamatara, and my younger sister, and sometimes we'd all end up there over the summer. And, you know, my sister made a comment one time about something that happened in an ecstasy session with Bert where our siblings were there. And I thought that I had done something. And then my other sister said, no, that wasn't you, that was Bert who did that. And I was like, oh my God, I've been carrying this shame and that's been in my relationship with my sister because I thought I did something to her sexually under the influence of ecstasy, and I had been carrying this shame and this guilt for this thing. And yet my other sister said, and they both said, no, that was Bert who did that. And I was like, oh my gosh. So when we sat down with Anka and Costa, that was the first time Costa came in and filmed that family circle. That was 5 years ago. Uncle pulled the four of us together, and we held a sharing circle, and we all took turns, and we shared what happened for us at Centrepoint. And that was the first time that I'd heard my siblings talk at any length, uninterrupted, unquestioned, so they could just really tell it all. That was the first time, so that was 5 years ago.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? So you're all carrying your own stories. You took to alcohol, promiscuous sex.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Worked as a prostitute, absolutely.
Can you make the link for me between having such a terrible experience, or was it having a terrible experience at Centrepoint with sex, and then taking it up as a profession?
Yeah, sure. So what happens for me, and I can't speak, for anybody else, but
No.
What happens for me is, from a very young age, people have been coming into my bedroom and interfering with me sexually. When I'm a really small child, I can't fight, I can't flee. So what I did was I froze. Now, in freeze, in the physical animal response of freeze, another aspect of myself took over. Okay, just let him do it. Just pretend it's okay. It's going to be over in a moment. Just come on, let's just get through this. And that happens every time I'm in a sexual situation, or has happened until I've started to do some healing around it. And there's something about, I would go out of body and I'd feel their body and their arousal and their power, and I'd identify with that, and I would start to get a rush out of the experience. So for me to flip that around and to work as a prostitute, there was such a sense of power in that. And because of my ability, and I didn't even know that I did that until later on a shamanic workshop, I realised that we did a little exercise where we went out and we went into the other person's body, or we training ourselves to go out of body, and I was like, oh my God, I'm out of body like that without even doing it. I do it like that. Subsequently, I've learned to begin to pull my awareness back inside my own body and done a lot of work around that. And I'm still practicing that in an intimate situation where I can learn to be present in my body.
Costa says a lot of the things that you're into in order to heal yourself are, kind of to him,
Yeah.
right? And you accept that.
Totally.
Shamanic, embodiment, all that.
Yeah.
But you clearly believe that it's helping you and it's what you need?
It's just kind of, I've just run into things and learnt things and practiced things that have really helped, yeah. And yeah, I don't need anyone else to believe that. I think, and the beautiful thing about Costa was almost like we were coming from the opposite ends of the spectrum. I was really in the shamanic world and working a lot, and I mean, I've always had strange experiences my whole life. I've seen things and heard things and had no reference point for what I was experiencing. And a lot of my alcohol drinking and drug taking was trying to drown out what I was experiencing. And through coming in across different people and different workshops, I've been able to get some understanding of my sensitivity, shall we say, and to be able to work with them rather than to try and shut them out. Yeah.
You've got 2 sons, and they speak in the documentary as well. They seem really nice people.
Mm.
And they've had some very hard times with you. They didn't see a lot of you when they were small.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that now?
Yeah, it's an interesting time of reflection. I'm going to be a grandmother in a couple of months. And that's brought me and my son closer together, which has been an interesting process. And yeah, we talk really openly about me, about our relationships, about the past, and I always have, possibly to my detriment, as the boys talk about in the documentary, or my youngest son Harry does, that it was just all out there. And the upside of that is they always know where they stand, and they have a lot of awareness about human beings and how they relate. And I don't feel. Of course, I wish it had gone another way, but I don't feel. I feel like they are the people they are because of what they've experienced, and they.
As you are.
People love them the way they are, so they wouldn't be who they are without having experienced all of that. So
do you take that attitude towards yourself? You wouldn't be the person you are if you hadn't gone through all this stuff.
Absolutely. I don't regret anything.
You don't?
No. Not even all of those experiences at Centrepoint, the horror, and I do some work supporting other women and some voluntary work, and I don't regret anything, because I feel like it can be of benefit to others. And really that's why I made the film. It was like I wanted to bring some light and some awareness to what happened at Centrepoint, and to where people are now, and to what people are facing in terms of within themselves, and why people don't talk about it. And
how many other people who were at Centrepoint have you got to know or made contact with?
Through the North and South article, that had me be a bit of a focal point for that, I guess. So I had a lot of contact around that time, and of course with this documentary going live, being advertised in the New Zealand International Film Festival, more people are contacting me. We have a lot of us who were teenagers then. We have we're in contact.
Were you one of those who brought charges against Bert Potter?
No. When I came out of the community, I maintained for a long time that everything I did there, I was a yes to. I said yes. I was a yes. I didn't understand why those girls were making those claims. Who were they to make those claims against Bert Potter and those amazing people at the community? Like, I was totally a stand for those witches. How could they go against the code? That's how I felt at the time. I wanted nothing to do with it.
What changed you?
Realising that I had been come under some kind of indoctrination.
When did you realise that? When did you get free of the indoctrination sufficiently to realise that you'd been indoctrinated?
It's been a process, I think, of having, counselling, psychotherapy, having things happen in my life, coming up feeling suicidal, having a person that I lived at Centrepoint with come and spend some time with me in a disassociated state, realising that my allegiance to her was stronger than it was to my own children, to have someone who was unstable in my house, to put my children through that. To then, when the UNCA's article came out, the North and South article, there's another woman in that article who was a girl at Centrepoint. When that article came out, we both kind of went into, I think I went into shock a little bit, even though I'd read the draft. And when I spoke with this girl on the phone, almost like the cult psychology or instruction or whatever it was, I just felt it surge up when I was in connection with her, and we kind of made UNCA wrong in our minds and made the whole process wrong. And I felt this allegiance and this power from connecting with the Centrepoint. It's like I can't even find the words for it. I don't even know the words. And I think in this country, I don't even know whether we have any cult specialists or cult deprogrammers, or I think those kinds of people, or that kind of training is really needed, because it's right through your whole psychology, emotionality. When you've made something your higher power, like made it your God, when you've given it so much power and you've become a subject to that, to then try and find a sense of self.
In the documentary, your aunt says that she was worried, and she asked you what Centrepoint was like, Bert Potter, and you said he was a really, really nice man.
Yeah.
So strange, huh?
Yeah, we lied. We lied at school. We lied to everyone's faces.
Without knowing you were lying at any stage.
Oh, no, we knew. Oh, no, you just did not tell everyone. They would not understand.
So it wasn't that you believed he was a really nice man. It was that you felt compelled to say that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because, we talk about in the documentary, we all found him really disgusting. I didn't want to be having sex with him. He was just old and fat and disgusting. But we did it because that's just what you do. That's what you do.
Do you think there's a point where you will have reached the end of the healing process?
I think...
In other words, are you going to be fixed soon? I realised...
I'm fixed already!
I realised that's what that question really sounded like. But you know what I mean.
Oh, I know. And Kester, my eldest son talks to that in the documentary. He's like, every workshop that Mum goes on, I don't know. I don't think there's an end point necessarily.
One of the boys says that it's like you're finishing a puzzle of yourself, and when you've done that jigsaw, then you can start. Maybe he means then you can start stopping the workshops and, go and travel and.
Yeah, that would be great.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
I'm talking to Angie Meiklejohn, who is a survivor of the notorious Centrepoint community. What do you want now? What do you want? I mean, the documentary makes it clear that you have great difficulty with intimate relationships.
Mm.
So, don't have one. How would that be?
Yeah, these are all the questions that I'm really sitting with,
right.
And I don't have answers for.
I mean, you don't have to be good at everything, right?
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know, my good friend Julie Edwards, she's in the film at the moment. She's she's in the film, and at the moment she's in Wellington, and I went to drama school with her. And I'm going to a lot of theatre, and I've always wanted to write a one-woman show about Mum, and I started a play a few years ago about set in a gentleman's club. It's about women's sexuality. And I feel like
you worked
maybe...
in the gentleman's club?
Yeah, at Bill Crow's. That's in the film as well.
Yes.
I feel like when I was at Centrepoint, I was kind of in third person, and I was like, this is going to make a really interesting story one day. And I felt like that when I was at Bill Crow's as well. I actually ended up filming him. I was at film school and made a bit of a documentary about him. And it's kind of like that now. It's like, I wonder if I'll begin my storytelling again, now that I've told this story that I feel like I've been carrying for so long, that I'll actually begin to be able to process through writing and through making work, rather than what I've been doing is, doing sex work, working as a conscious sensuality practitioner. I've been trying to work out my sexual issues through learning about sexuality, about sexual energy, about intimacy. I've been working as an intimacy coach. I kind of laugh about it because, I'm teaching that stuff to learn it myself. I'm not teaching it from any place of I know. I'm teaching it from what is this, and how do human beings even navigate this really tricky territory? So I don't know. I don't know whether I'll continue to do that. I mean, that's my work, or whether I'll branch off or split out and do the acting and the writing. Or whether it will be a combination of the two. I actually don't know. I feel like I've come to this point of, I used to be propelled to heal, like just so propelled to heal. And I feel like watching the documentary and seeing myself through another person's eyes has been like, whoa, like, this is a real hodgepodge of what a life. And also the documentary ends, he had to stop filming at some point. And, of course, subsequently in the last year since we've filmed, I feel like I've come through a whole lot of stuff to the point where I don't feel the need to do that real intense work on myself anymore. And I said to him the other day, it would be so nice if we could end the documentary like on a, kind of on a higher note. And he said, well, I can't film you forever. But... And I guess it has to end somewhere, and it ends where it does. And people have seen.
Well, you could just have a sort of rolling footnote saying Angie's better now.
I don't think there's anywhere to get to. Like, I feel like...
No, right. There's no destination.
Yeah.
It's always a process.
Absolutely.
But I watched the documentary and I talk to you now, and I see an extraordinarily healthy, warm, highly functioning human being. Is that how you feel inside?
Wow. Some days.
Right.
Yeah. Some days.
That's quite a big deal, to feel those things.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel calm and happy and peaceful and a lot of the time. And I've also worked my life out so I can experience that. Living on my own. I'm living on my own for the first time in my life.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Because
hitherto it seems to be a compulsion to live with a man.
Yeah, it totally did, yeah. I mean, I haven't had that many relationships, but I've never... I mean, I don't even know. I don't know whether I'm heterosexual. I don't know whether I'm homosexual. I don't know whether I'm asexual. I don't know about myself. All of my relationships have begun with someone being attracted to me and inviting me to come on a bit of a ride with them. And I've gone, oh, okay. And that's how every relationship of mine has started. I've never gone, whoa, I really dig that person. I wonder if I'll ask them out.
So
I've never had that experience.
You've not been the active individual in any partnership ever?
No.
Oh.
No.
And how is it being on your own?
I really love it. I mean, I live right across from the ocean, on the south coast, and that's all I see is ocean. And that's my favourite place, being in the sea. I'm a bit of a seal. So I feel really happy there. Mm.
That's good then, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what sort of work are you doing on yourself at the moment?
Oh, no, that's a big question.
I know.
I don't think you've got time.
Give me a clue.
Well, my training that I did last year is as a sexological body worker. So that's a massive
A
conversation.
sexological body worker.
Yeah.
Who made that up?
The University of California. Trust the Americans.
Seriously, okay.
So in order to do that work, I need to have supervision. I need to having those sessions with other certified sexological body workers. So that's my way of keeping the work going. And I'm just about to start working in that arena after training and doing my practice hours and whatnot. And I'm at the threshold of, do I step into that work? Is that just another form of trying to heal myself? Is that going to serve me? Am I doing this because I want to heal the whole of humanity in the area of sexuality? And am I doing that because I want to heal myself? Or part of me just wants to raise the whole of humanity's consciousness. I mean, 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused, 1 in 5 boys that we know about. That means 1 in 3 men and women are doing the abusing. You know, these questions about what is pedophilia, why is it so prolific in our society? I mean, those questions are really present for me. Do I then go and do more research and learn about that, and so I can help humanity in that way? I mean, I just have this desire for humanity to evolve, which is just so much a part of my everyday waking life. Part of me feels that's why I'm here, why I've had this whole experience, is so I can then learn from that and then be able to give and be of service. So that's what that work's about. And then part of me's like, I just want to do what I was doing before all of that, which I just loved singing and acting and being on stage and performing, and that was my whole life before Centrepoint. That's what I loved, playing my guitar and writing music. Part of me is like, I just want to do that, you know.
You say at the end of the documentary, wouldn't it be great if we could just wipe it all away and start again?
Yeah.
But having said that, you don't regret anything, and you are what you are today because of what's happened.
Yeah.
So you've got those two things to contend with, right?
Yeah.
Your mother, do you think she was bipolar from the very beginning?
My mother was sexually abused and she was 1.5, 2 years old.
Oh, Lord. By her grandfather?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Early on, and then she wrote me a letter before she died listing all the abuse she'd ever suffered. And it was horrendous. You know, she'd go and do her brownie badges at people's houses and they'd do whatever to her. So my mum was really damaged. And
So do you think... I mean, she was bipolar.
She was diagnosed as bipolar.
But
I don't know whether that's... I think chemically that's what you can develop. But it's like, where does that begin? Where does that split begin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of, you know, mental illness and whatnot comes from early childhood trauma. It's the inability of the nervous system and the mind to integrate the trauma that's happening, because your security is threatened, and that's really damaging. I mean, they're making those links now in studies between sexual trauma and mental illness and whatnot. So I think there's going to be a lot more information that comes out in this next 10 years about those kinds of things.
So Jules Barber is in the documentary and she says, I don't know anyone who's done so much work on herself. And it hasn't, you know, that's taken a lot of time and energy. That's a real mission you've been on, isn't it?
Well, I'd be dead if I didn't do it. Like, I've come to that point of suicide so many times, like, and once really, really dramatically, which I talk about in the film. And it was from that point. And, you know, I feel
that was a turning point for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
You got very, very drunk. And
well, I was absolutely lucid. I drank and drank and drank and I couldn't get drunk. And then I thought, well, I'm out. I cannot live this life anymore. And I was going to stay kill myself. And I feel like Mum's suicide was the greatest gift to me. And I actually felt like that at the time, which is weird to say.
How did she kill herself?
She threw herself off the balcony when she was in my care. Yeah.
And damaged herself so severely.
Yeah, I think she broke her. She hadn't eaten or slept for a week because she was having an episode, and she'd actually been getting higher and higher for a year. Unmedicated, unsupported, yeah.
Do you have to feel, or have you dealt with feeling guilty about that?
At first I just felt angry. I felt angry that my stepfather didn't get her help, that he listened to her and put her wants and needs of not having any kind of intervention over that, over what was doing what was best for her. But at the time, the police officer said to me, I have to ask you this, but, did you have anything to do with her going off the deck? And I said, I would have liked to have thrown her off. I hated her that much. I would have liked to have picked her up and thrown her off the deck myself. But I said no, but I didn't. Yeah. Because it was a paradox. I loved her with all of my heart. And I hated her. Because probably much the same as my children said about me. It was just her whole life and her whole process was right there in front of me my whole life, and I just wanted to be as far away from it as possible. I've just found her horrifying.
So part of what you're doing is breaking some kind of cycle.
Absolutely. I'm so glad I haven't had a girl child. I was just so glad that it ended with me. And that as far as I know, my children weren't sexually abused. I know my mother's mother was as well. So it's it's just down this family line. And I hope it's ended with me, yeah.
That was Angie Meiklejohn. And the documentary is called Angie. It's directed by Costa Botes, and it will premiere at the New Zealand International Film Festival in July, kicking off in Auckland.